Thank you. All right, so I'm going to start off with a story about all of you. So, sorry. Okay, well, that's going to have to work. Okay, so my story, Okay, so my story goes back to when you were young, and looking out there, I know that some of you still are young. This is a story when you had principles, you had ideals, you wanted to build code and solve problems as a developer, and you didn't want to just solve any certain problem. You wanted to solve the super hard problems, the super complex problems, the most unique original code you wanted to build, and it was going to be innovative, right? Jake's talking about clever code, creating those clever solutions. You wanted to be the one who generated all this stuff, right? So you set out on your journey and you built a super amazing thing, right? Website, product, whatever it is. You built a solution for a problem that was one of those no one can solve it kind of problems, right? Nathan talked about problems that are super challenging to solve. Those are the ones you're after. And you did it. So you sat back in your chair, you kicked your feet up on your desk, and you said, "Ah, man, this thing's perfect. It does exactly what I want it to do. It's exactly what the client wants to do. It's elegant, it's sophisticated, it's amazing, and it's perfect. And I'm super pumped." So then your boss came around and said, "Hey, so your code's been working pretty well for the last couple of months, and we've been gaining some traction on our project. But we keep getting these prospective clients who they come and they say, 'Oh, it's really cool. It does like 99% of what I want. If it just had this one feature,'" right? And you know what that one feature is. It's like the most ridiculous feature that anyone could ever associate with your project. It's almost not even close enough to associate with what you built in the first place. And so you think, my boss is a reasonable guy. We're going to talk this out. I'm going to rationalize with him. And we'll table this and we'll just keep on with this system that I built. So you have that discussion with him, and it doesn't go so well. You end up having to build that feature, whatever it is. And by the way, because your boss is super awesome, he's promised it for the client by next Wednesday. So you're not going to have any time to be sophisticated, plan these things out. So this is you on Monday morning. You come in and you're hacking away at all the elegance that you created that took you months to create. You're ripping things apart. You're pulling out those things that made you so proud. And by the end of this, you're not going to want to have your name anywhere near this thing that is just a mess. So you've built this feature, and you got it out there, and you made it through, but now you've got this application that you're not proud of. So everybody take a breath. Like, we've gone through that together. We're good. Let's fast forward back to today. You have a lot of experience now, and you know that these things are going to happen. You know that your boss is going to come across and say, "Hey, we need this one feature that's ridiculous," and you know what to expect from everybody else in the project. If you're building something for a client, you know the stakeholder doesn't care that you're building in WordPress. All they care about is that it works and it meets the requirements. But you still have this little developer in your ear telling you we got to build this super awesome, super sophisticated, really elegant solution to make sure that, it's a solid piece of software. Nobody wants to ship bug-ridden software. And you also know that your code is not something that just is a CD. You burn it. If it doesn't work, crack it in half, throw it away, burn another one, change it over time. It's not a finite piece of software. It's something that lives, it breathes. You know that by Monday morning, you're going to have a list after you launch something that, you're already ready to work on next week because it's an iterative process. So the only guarantee that I can give you is that when you have that launch, you're going to have a list of things to work on. It's not a dead thing at that point. But because you want that little developer inside you wants to build that elegant solution, you have to now plan for the unknown. You have to plan for something you've never thought of. Pippin said yesterday that, in Easy Digital Downloads, that he probably knows 1 to 5% of possible use cases for his software. That's a hard thing to plan for. And the only way that you can do that is to leave yourself that flexibility in your code to change it over time. So how do you go about doing that in WordPress? We've got these great things, the things that make WordPress all that it is the actions and filter system, right? The ability to extend WordPress. So you leave yourself these trail markers, and you put these in, just like core does for all of us, extending it. You put in actions and filters because you don't want to have to then take something and rip it apart because you need to use it somewhere else or anything. You leverage this action and filter system. What's interesting is as I've grown as a developer, I've been reviewing more code instead of just writing it. And when I'm in my own little world, I do certain things. And what I've seen as a trend is that when developers release something publicly, they're more apt to use actions and filters because they're thinking ahead, and they're thinking, somebody's going to do something that I never would have thought of, which is great. That's what we want it to be. But I don't understand why we don't do that for ourselves. If we're building a project for our client that we're going to have to maintain, why wouldn't we use actions and filters? Why wouldn't we place little breadcrumbs for us to come back to and change or modify or unhook functionality that's not needed? Chris talked earlier about the development cycle and how to manage that slippage. How do you manage code being written, thousands of lines of code, that suddenly the client's like, you know what? That's not really what we meant. You have to be able to go and pivot quickly. And it doesn't mean ripping out hundreds of lines of code that are integration. If you're leaving yourself actions and filters throughout your code, you can essentially decouple your bits of code from themselves. So let's look at just some actions and filters just to see kind of how you might do this. So initially, you have to set the hook. And in my hypothetical example here, let's just say I'm doing some sort of processing on some data input that's coming in. I'm hooking into an it, so I'm hooking in very high, and I have my callback. So the first parameter there is the hook I'm looking into. Second one is my callback function. And the third one is the priority. How high in the stack do I want this to go? Do I want it to go first? Do I want it to go last? Whatever. So then I have my callback function. In here, instead of writing the code to actually process this function right within the hook in the callback function, I do something that's a little more flexible. I create my own action, and I tie it in with my process, my workflow. So that way, if tomorrow a client comes in and says, hey, you know what, we don't want to use credit cards anymore straight through authorize.net. We want to use PayPal processing. You can easily come in here and go, you know what, that's fine. I'll just unhook my credit card stuff and hook in some PayPal functionality. The way that we treat actions are injecting bits of code, so you can execute along a procedural path. So this is one of those spots where, you know, I could have just written the code there, but instead I'm leaving myself a breadcrumb. So do action works a lot like add action, in that you give it a hook name. This one it's tied to my callback here, so I can create another hook, and I'm passing along the post variable for this specific call. So whatever page I'm on, maybe that's important. So I'm passing that on to future me, and you know, hoping that will be helpful if it's relevant to what I'm doing. But where this becomes great is, let's say you have something for, you know, a client in a department, and there's another department that needs a similar functionality, but they don't need this particular bit. By being able to use remove action, you can actually just take away that bit of code without having to strip everything out. So it's a little bit different of an approach to building out functionality, but it makes for really quick mocking of workflows. On the other side of things, data manipulation mostly, you have filters. So just like with actions, you've got a hook starting out. The content is the core one, obviously. And then I have my callback BD content with a standard priority. And something I didn't show in actions, but is also available, is the number of arguments you want to pass along. So in this case, I'm just passing one, but if you have just one, you don't need to include that number, but it could be any number. And my callback looks like this here. So same thing, this has an argument with content. Instead of just returning whatever my modification is, I have my own custom filter. So rather than do filter, for whatever reason, it's apply filters. And I've got a hook. I've got my processed content. So I have string replaced WP with WordPress. And that's my default return value. But I'm also passing the original content. So let's say, for example, you know, I'm filtering later down the line and I don't unhook this. I can leverage whatever the original content was in my next hook callback. And similarly to actions, you can unhook the filters. So again, this modular processing of code is what we're really after here. The ability to quickly pivot, even if you spent hours of code or hours of time building code along one path that's going away, it's a 2-second process to get rid of that. So rarely in our work do we ever get a project where it's, you know, a single piece of functionality, like I just want this one thing. It's a large project, right? And that becomes a challenge. So when you look at contracts that come in or RFPs that come in and you see, you know, a 40-page document of features, you start scoping those things out and putting together an SOW so that you know the entire breadth of what this project's going to be. But I challenge you to think a little smaller. It's not easy to step back and think, what are the individual components here that we can build sort of quickly? And there's several problems to this. So what happens if Like Chris said, a requirement needs to be replaced by something new and shiny. The longer a project goes on, the more thoughts come out of the client. So, that's a real concern. What happens if you are super successful? Of course you are, because that's what we're here for. And a client wants you to do this for another department in their same business. And besides the fact that large code bases are very hard to maintain because it's hard to remember all the bits and pieces, especially in a team environment. So what we do is we build little plugin suites for our clients that build out data architecture separately, build out processing separately. We really break it down to the smallest bits of components because when dealing with enterprise clients, that's what they want. They want stable platforms that can be built off of, that they can use multiple times without having to incur additional costs. They don't want something off the shelf because they have very many internal workflows that may not apply to. They have concerns about software bloat or jQuery being on Google or anything like that. So it's good to build up your library of what these little plugin suites are. So one thing we do this a lot with is custom post types. How many of you guys have built like a team custom post type like 75 times, right? So what we've started doing is we build that once with the base set of functionality. And that base set of functionality is a thumbnail, a bio, title, all the basic things you need for a team member. And we can unhook and hook those as we need to. But we have this sort of base starting point for all this kind of stuff. If you don't have a library of these things, how are you generating it? Probably like a snippet, some sort of something in your IDE, or maybe you do have a library on GitHub, something like that you can pull from. But God forbid, hopefully you don't have to pull it out of another project. So these are some ways that you could do it. Like I said, having a library on GitHub or Bitbucket or wherever that you can pull from. You can use something like Sublime or something to autocomplete, do a little short tag. Or you could use something like Yeoman or Generate WP to generate some of these things for you. So the approach we've taken is adopting Yeoman. And we haven't gotten around to trying Composer. After yesterday's talk on Composer, I think we'll probably start going that route. But as Zoe mentioned yesterday, it's being able to regenerate code that you've already done and that you're happy with, and it solves the problem, is huge. So just some quick steps on how you do that. It requires npm to start, but you just type npm install global yo, and it will set up all the dependencies, everything. While you're building your code generators, because it's not just a plugin file that you need, you have to actually build a generator. While you're building this, it's useful not to have that generator somewhere else where you have to keep going remote and making it happen. So npm link will create a symlink between that folder and Yeoman so that you can do your own local generators. And so for us, it's as simple as typing yo cpt. It's like yo MTV Raps, I think. So yo cpt, we get a couple questions back from Yeoman, but it ends us up in this directory structure. We have the root folder, we've got assets, we've got CSS, all that kind of stuff. We have a lib folder that has all of our relative code, and we have a theme templates folder. Now, this theme templates folder is something we learned through our commercial plugin. Being able to have somebody modify what the markup looks like for your custom post type is huge. So we have default templates. All of our custom post types ship with default theme templates. And if you drag one of those theme templates, like let's say archive.php, and change it for whatever the slug is in your theme, it will automatically use that one first, and then it will fall back to the one that's in the plugin folder. I've got a couple minutes left here, so I'll just do a quick demo of what our Yeoman setup looks like. Let's see here. Whoa, that's huge. Oh, it went to the wrong screen. Sorry. Okay, so, oh wow, that is humongous. Okay, so basically we've got a project here. This is basically our index file where we asked only 2 questions to create a custom post type. We ask what the text domain is, because that helps set up the plugin architecture. It helps for translations, things like that. And we ask what type of custom post type we have. Now, it's not foolproof because we don't have every custom post type you could ever develop in the world, but given some known ones in our company, you can generate some things. So it asks you those 2 things. And then what it does is it goes through and pulls down the latest master of whatever that custom post type plugin is off of GitHub, and it's tied to that type that you specified before. And then once it's done, it renames that folder from whatever it downloads to the text domains. We can generate one here. Whoa, that's humongous too. Hey, there we go. Okay, so I'm just in a plugins folder in my local trunk here. And where's my folder? So inside plugins here, somebody shout me out a text domain, any slug. Loopconf, good. Okay, let's just make sure there's no loopconf one in here. Okay, there's no loopconf. Nothing up the sleeves. Okay, so loopconf. So you type that, which custom post type. I happen to know that we just built a lessons one. So you enter that, pulls that down, and it says, okay, cool, you did it. And then you see right here, the loopconf lessons data architecture. And if I can. So again, we have this folder structure here that we've defined, has all of our code in it for the plugin itself, and all that it requires now is that you activate this plugin. So that is what I got. I am Brandon Dove. You can find me at Brandon Dove on Twitter. And if you are interested, we are, like everybody else, hiring. So you can find us at picklejar.com. Thank you.